Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Amy Christensen, and I'm the Marketing Director at GTT. And as you all know, Opticom is the gold standard for emergency vehicle preemption, and for over 50 years, we've been helping first responders get on the scene quickly and safely. Today, we're presenting Save Money and Time and Lives, why your city needs EVP today. And our presenter is Josh Lehman, Sales Engineer with GTT. But before we start, I'm going to do a little housekeeping. One, talking and noise, addressing talking and noise. To avoid any distraction, I've muted everybody that I can. If you are on a dial-up or on a VoIP, go ahead and mute your line to avoid any distractions. So far, so good. Sounds great right now. Presentation material. Tomorrow, we're going to go ahead and send a short email with the webinar recording, related materials, and contact information. If you'd like the actual presentation, please let me know, and I'll send you a copy. Questions. We want this to be interactive as possible, but there's a lot of people on the line, and we'll need you to enter your questions in the box in your WebEx control panel to your right. And then we'll address them at the end of the session. At the end of the session, I'll bring up all of the questions as submitted, and if we don't get to your question, we'd like to address it personally, so we'll either contact you if we have your contact information with the question, or in the email tomorrow, there'll be contact information that will be sent out. And go ahead and feel free to reach out to us about any question that you have, and we'll connect you with the right GTT resource. Now let's get started with the webinar. I'm going to hand the presentation over to Josh. Josh, take it away. Oh, sorry, Josh.
Yeah, no, that's not a problem. Thanks, everybody, again, for joining us. My name is Josh Lehman, the Solutions Architect here at Global Traffic Technologies, manufacturer of the Opticom system. So I'll be going through our slide presentation today. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm really the part of the design team on the more on the sales side, as well as providing product demonstrations, things like that. So that's some of my background. As far as what we'll be showing today, we will be going through really who GTT is, followed by an explanation of what EVP, or emergency vehicle preemption, is and how it works. Some key challenges that we're seeing different emergency vehicle agencies or emergency agencies that are dealing with today, which kind of leads into some of the improved response times, as well as safety that we can realize through emergency vehicle preemption. Some of the technologies and ways that we can deploy EVP solutions today. Many people kind of still have the assumption or the idea of EVP or preemption really being an optical-based solution, but there's a lot of different ways that we can deploy these types of solutions now, based on obviously new technologies and things like that. And then finally, we'll talk about different budget considerations and other solutions, such as our priority control as a service. So we'll go into detail on really what that is and how different agencies around North America have really been able to benefit from going using priority control as a service rather than a traditional capital purchase. So who we are, Global Traffic Technologies is the manufacturer of Opticom. Opticom is the industry leader as far as preemption and priority control solutions. It's been around for around 50 years in 31 of the 3,100 cities throughout the world. So we are a worldwide organization with a significant footprint in North America. As part of being a leader, we've also found ways to innovate new ways to provide preemption. These have evolved really over the years as obviously new technologies emerge, new standards emerge, and basically finding ways to adopt those standards in order to provide really more of a seamless solution for our customers. And as part of that, we've designed our solutions to be flexible and scalable. So we have small customers, a city of a couple thousands with a couple intersection, and then we have large customers such as New York City, San Francisco, Montreal. So our solutions kind of fall everywhere in between as well, and making sure that they're reliable, sustainable, and highly interoperable is also something that's really important to us and important to our customers as well. So what is EVP? So EVP, Emergency Vehicle Preemption, it's designed to really give emergency vehicles a green light at an intersection. So the idea is, obviously, without some sort of a V2I, which is like a vehicle to intersection communication, as vehicles responding to a call, they might run into red lights, for example. Going through red lights is obviously dangerous, both for anyone else on the road as well as the emergency vehicle. Ladder trucks obviously can be very hard to maneuver intersections when you have a lot of traffic. So EVP is really designed to request a green light at the intersection on a given approach, and then the controller will determine if it can grant that. So contrary to some beliefs, I guess, preemption systems actually only request priority. They're not giving a green light. We request priority from the traffic controller, and the traffic controller, based on a number of different parameters, will determine if a preemption request can be granted and the vehicle can get a green light. So as I discussed before, there are a couple different ways that we can deploy this technology. It's all some sort of V2I technology, so vehicle to intersection communication. Typically in the past, it's been, starting with our first generation product, which is really our infrared, moving to our second generation, which was a radio-based with GPS, and then finally move into a cellular and more of an IoT-based or type solution that we're seeing become more and more prevalent, more and more popular with our customers industry-wide. So that's the different ways that we kind of deploy a little bit of really what it is. Now kind of how it works, right? So we talked about the infrared-based technology. So here I show an ambulance. So this is really more of our Generation 1 product. This has been around for 50 years. Still probably the most widely used product, although many customers are moving to other technologies with Opticom as well. So it's a line-of-sight product. So there's an infrared emitter that's sitting on the vehicle, sending a request to the intersection. There's a detector sitting at the intersection facing each approach. As the vehicle approaches the intersection, based on a certain distance to the intersection, we start making a preemption request. So that preemption request then is sent down to the traffic cabinet or the traffic controller, and there it's granted. So the second generation of that is really our radio-based. We call it Opticom GPS. It uses GPS to determine location, but it uses a radio to be able to communicate to the intersection. So in this case, we have basically a vehicle kit that sits on an emergency vehicle. There's an antenna on top of the vehicle to collect GPS data as well as communicate to the intersection. So this is bi-directional communication. We're communicating to the intersection and the intersection is actually communicating back some bits of data as well. And then we're actually to send a preemption request to the intersection, and we don't need to worry about, for example, line of sight. Anytime there's, for example, trees in the way or maybe other buildings as we're going around a corner, we can now preempt around the corner instead of always having to have line of sight, which obviously adds the ability to a lot of times be able to preempt sooner rather than, especially around corners and things like that. As you're going down a corridor, sometimes with an IR system, especially if it's set up to just start preemption as soon as it sees a vehicle, what can happen is the whole corridor will be preempted, whether you go straight through the corridor or turn halfway through the corridor. With something like a GPS radio-based technology, we can integrate with things like turn signals and other pieces of information on the vehicle to get a better idea of, hey, are we going to be turning left halfway through through the corridor, or are we going to be going straight through? No reason to preempt the forward or the following intersections if we're not going to be going through them to really minimize the impact on traffic. So that's the infrared technology as well as our GPS radio-based technology solution. And now, which is becoming more popular, we started this in 2012, so it has been about 7 years that we've had this deployed, but it's our Opticom centralized architecture. So with this architecture, we have equipment that sits on the vehicle. We can also provide a software-based solution as well that sends a request to a central management center, or in some cases a cloud-hosted architecture, down and sends a request directly then to the traffic controller using standard protocols. So in this case, we actually have 0 hardware at the intersection, which traffic engineers typically really like. Obviously, less equipment to maintain is always a plus for them, and also giving them more control in the system and using their existing network comms. So this type of architecture, like I said, has become definitely more of a hot item that cities, especially larger cities, are migrating to, just due to the reduced maintenance that a system like this would use, as well as the increased utilization of their investments that they already have.
Can you change this and put, like...
Sorry. Yeah, if you're on the phone, please mute. That'd be greatly appreciated. And then we can take questions at the end. All right, so we talked about a little bit of the technology, as well as some of the ways that the solution has been deployed. Another piece here is really, why are we talking about preemption? How is it changing? And a lot of it has to do with the cities are becoming more complicated. We're seeing an increase in population. A lot of that is due to urbanization. Changing demographics as well. We have a lot of the younger generation moving into the city, but we do have an aging baby boom generation that's affecting where we're responding to and things like that. Also, obviously, the increase in desire for, especially the millennial generation, to want public transportation. That's changing the ways that we're designing roads and giving other vehicles access to where they need to go. As part of that, obviously, there's an increase in congestion and the aging infrastructure. So the infrastructure is not necessarily keeping up with the changing demands of the city. Although things are becoming more network connected, providing us a variety of different solutions and flexibility. We're able to collect a lot more data, do more analytics and reporting on that data as well. But obviously that adds another level of complexity to these types of solutions that really weren't previously available. Obviously, as part of that too, as part of the changing city, there's been a desire really to move to more of a walkability architecture for cities or infrastructure, which is actually putting a lot of pressure on vehicles, whether it be emergency vehicles or private vehicles in a city. And so they're prioritizing a lot of walkability, which is making it more difficult, increasing congestion, making it more difficult for emergency vehicles to move through a city. And then as many of you know, with different elections and political issues, the pressures that are throughout cities, sometimes funding can change rapidly depending on who's in power, what the priorities are at that given time. Obviously, from a political standpoint, making sure that the city is happy, the citizens are happy is something that's important. And as part of that, funding, right? Funding is always a challenge, but those things are changing, right? Now we're seeing more OpEx budgets, operational budgets, in some cases less capital purchase budgets. So it's changing the way that emergency agencies are funding a lot of these solutions. So as part of those part of the changing of the cities, these are some of the challenges that we're typically seeing for different emergency vehicle agencies. So obviously a big one is accidents. Accidents can obviously have a significant impact on fire staff as well as citizens that can be involved in that as well. So a lot of cities, especially medium to larger cities, are putting together risk assessment teams. They're finding that if they invest in reducing risk for the city, they're actually able to save more money even with the extra staff and the extra investment that they're making. So we're working with a lot of risk assessment agencies and cities in finding ways to reduce risk, obviously, to their citizens as well as to their public employees that they work for as well. And then, as we discussed too, obviously increased congestion, additional, the ability for more walkability but less drivability has resulted in delays. So response times is a big piece of that. Response times too relate to which I'll discuss in a little bit, the ISO ratings, as well as other metrics that are national-wide metrics that are, in some cases, required for different fire agencies. So making sure that they meet those metrics is very important. And obviously, there's always different options, such as do we get there faster, or do we build additional fire stations? We add additional people. What's the best way to solve the problem? And there's a lot of different solutions, obviously, to be able to do that. Mutual aid is always a huge one, especially with fire and police departments, and obviously EMS as well. But being able to cross different jurisdictions and still ensure that your preemption solution works is really, really important, especially for drivers. Having the confidence to know that, hey, my solution is going to work whether I'm working in my city, I'm traversing a county or another city. Having that interoperability and that reliability is highly desired. And then finally, obviously, maximizing your return. So leveraging resources and budget, also leveraging existing investments. We see that as a key driver for a lot of agencies now, especially on the traffic side, but as well as on the fire side. Obviously, if you have GPS on your vehicle already, if you have a cellular modem on your vehicle already, we want to utilize your current investment. We don't want to add a lot of redundancy. And agencies that we work with don't want that either. Simplifying the solution is really important. So as part of the accidents, like I said, this is a challenge that a lot of the different agencies face. In 2016, vehicle crashes were the second leading cause of fatal firefighter industries for the year, almost 4 times the previous year's total. So obviously, this is something that is not a problem that's being resolved with just as kind of technology migrates. Making sure that we put in solutions that'll help reduce that is important. Over 1,500 or 1,000 of those collisions involved fire department emergency vehicles, with 700 firefighters injured resulting from these collisions. So obviously, there is an expense for the vehicles, getting vehicles repaired, but a lot of times the medical expenses far outweigh the actual damage that's done to these vehicles. So the average cost of the injury for the motor vehicle crash is about $178,000 for serious injury, and $371 on average for a severe injury, and that's provided by the U.S. Department of Commerce. So that was 2005. Obviously, those expenses have only increased over time, over the last 10 years or so. So this is something that's really driven a lot of our customers to move to some sort of preemption solution. So typically, what do our customers see when they get preemption? So what we're seeing is really up to a 25% reduction in response time. Obviously, there's a number of different factors that go into this, but we have a variety of different case studies that show. In some cases, we've actually have customers that have had over 30%, 34% actually reduction in response time. So depending on your situation, obviously, and the number of intersections that you equipped with this type of system, you can see a significant reduction in response time. We've actually had some agencies, too, that were planning on building out a new fire station, decided not to build a new, multi-million-dollar fire station with additional employees, obviously, that have a reoccurring cost, but they were able to install a preemption solution, reduce their response time, in order to make sure that their fire agency was more efficient and using their tax dollars really more intelligently for the community. Second point here is really the reduction in crashes. So typically we see over a year up to about a 70% reduction in intersection crashes. And a big part of that too is really the liability. So making sure that as a fire vehicle is going through the intersection, they do have a green light. In most cases, customers that we've worked with, if a fire vehicle or any emergency vehicle goes through an intersection on a red light and there's an accident, the driver of that emergency vehicle is at fault. So now kind of taking that off the mind of the driver, giving them the confidence to know that they're going to have a green light at the intersection and they just have to worry about getting to the intersection as fast as they can and as safely as they can, is really, really key for a lot of our customers. And then, like I said, obviously preventing injuries and reducing related costs is highly desirable. And we've definitely seen, and we can provide a number of case studies throughout our 50 years of existence for Opticom of ways that fire agencies and police and EMS have been able to utilize these technologies to reduce their response time as well as their crashes. So another thing I wanted to point out, like I said, we talked about the ISO ratings. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this. Many of you probably are, as well as the National Fire Protection Association standard, the 1710. So the ISO rating, this is a rating that insurance companies basically give for a given area or a house. So anytime you're requesting insurance, what they do is they take this rating into account. It's sometimes called a fire score, and what it does is it's a rating based on a response time, quality of training for your fire department, as well as a number of different factors that kind of go into account to determine, okay, what's the premium going to be for this house, for example, for their insurance. Obviously, if there's a slower response time or the fire agency is less trained, there's a higher risk for additional fire damage if, for example, a call is put into place and the emergency vehicle doesn't come for, let's say, 15 minutes. That's going to be a much higher premium than something where there's an expectation that the vehicle is going to be there within 5 minutes, for example. So this is something that is kind of coming up as a big driver in a lot of cases. Obviously, talking to a city board, talking about ways to reduce insurance premiums for citizens is really important, especially helping drive more civilians to move into a certain area. This can help drive that. So we've definitely seen different ways that fire agencies have been able to use this fact to really push a preemption solution in their area, because obviously reduction in response time helps this number. With that as well, there is another standard that came out in 2001, I believe. This was a standard, a nationwide standard for response times. So this is something that every agency or vast majority of agencies have to adhere to, depending obviously on where they are, size of the city, things like that. But these are metrics that need to be hit, and like I said, with the challenges that cities are facing with increased congestion and things like that, being able to hit these numbers is really important, and using something like preemption to be able to do that is definitely a benefit that our customers are realizing as well. So we talked about some of the challenges. Another challenge is obviously infrastructure. There's a lot of different ways that we maybe want to deploy these types of solutions. Like I said, there's the traditional infrared-based solution, hardware at the vehicle, hardware at the intersection, sending a request. On those types of solutions, obviously there's a little more maintenance, making sure that everything's clean, facing the correct direction, things like that. Moving more to our second generation, which is a radio-based, single antenna at the intersection, equipment on the vehicle, and then seeing more of a third generation with increased connectivity, obviously, for reporting, things like that, but also being able to have really unlimited distance when it comes to sending a preemption request. So kind of gone are the days of worrying about, if I'm going 60 miles an hour down a highway and I have to hit a light that I need to preempt, am I going to hit the intersection before a preemption request is sent to the and have enough time to clear out the traffic? That kind of concern is gone now with a centralized solution, as well as we're able to do additional reporting. Obviously, reporting is a huge part of pretty much everybody's everyday life now. Reporting on different metrics that you're hitting either monthly, yearly, or quarterly, and having the data be able to do that. We provide with any of our, Gen 2, really a distributed GPS, or really even with our IR, we provide that ability for reporting, given obviously that the vehicle and intersections are connected, or you can also do it manually. Obviously, manually going to every intersection is not desired, so having the connectivity is important. As part of that, there's different ways that we can do this, and there's different things to take into consideration. So obviously, technology varies across departments. So we see a lot of different, especially in a city or a region, you could have a variety of different Cat AVL vendors. You could have a variety of different network infrastructure. So you could have, the city, the county, the state, maybe another neighboring cities all have different network infrastructure, varying in different complexities. So understanding that is really important, as well as, like I said, the on-board equipment, understanding budgets, right? So understanding what the budget is for the fire department, what is it for the police department, what is it for the traffic department, what is it for the city? Does the city have risk money that they can use to help fund some of these solutions as well? And a lot of times, like I said, the funding doesn't come from one group. A lot of times it's coming from multiple, but in some cases, it's just a single as well. But those are varied throughout customers. So really understanding where the budget's coming from, where the money is coming from, how it can be used. But does it have to be technology? Does it have to be capital? Can it be for an OpEx expense? These types of questions are really important when we're looking at just overall infrastructure and really how we can deploy these types of solutions. And then, like I said, multiple different hardware providers, software providers. Most cities, most agencies that we deal with have multiple different types of controllers as well as multiple different manufacturers of controllers. So making sure that whatever solution works for the city is going to, or what solution that you have available is going to work for the city is critical. Obviously, you don't want to try to halfway deploy a solution, especially when you're looking at preemption. Being able to deploy a solution across the city with a varying technology is something that's really important to make sure that you have a holistic solution and really not like a half or a partial solution for the city or for the fire agency. So like I said, with these different technologies, we like to talk about it really on a technology curve. Everyone's going to have a different level of comfort and a different budget and a different plan for really where they want to be in, what would be considered a classical technology curve. You're always going to have your innovators, right? Your innovators are those that are kind of leading edge. They're willing to take on their technology risk. An example of this is DSRC versus 5G, right? There's a lot of discussion within kind of the technology realm of the traffic space to determine what's really going to be the leading technology. Are we looking at DSRC? Is it going to be a cellular 5G world? Taking the investment right now, whether it be DSRC or 5G, is something that a lot of different cities are putting in those investments, but other agencies or cities might not be as comfortable. They want to maybe use a solution that's more tried and true, a solution that's been around for maybe a little longer, has a solid user base. They might be kind of more of an early adopter. You also see kind of the early majority, late majority, and laggards, obviously different technology throughout that. Typically what we consider a late majority now is really more using the infrared-based technology. Early adopter would be considered more of a software-based solution, and then the early majority is really the GPS radio. So there's really no right answer of where you should be on this curve. It really just depends on what the availability is of your funding, of your budget, and what your risk assessment is for the technology that you want to use. So as part of that, one thing that we focus on really is more of a connected ecosystem, not just thinking about the fire department, not just thinking about the the police department or the transit or things like that. It's really easy in cities to become siloed and understand just your specific silo, basically, of your organization. But the most successful cities that we've seen have been able to work across multiple different agencies, utilize their existing infrastructure, whether that be cellular, fiber, or other, infrared GPS-based technologies, and be able to utilize all of those to be able to provide a solution or come up with a solution that's really going to work for all parties. And a lot of times, because of that, too, all the funding can come from all the parties as well. So even though that your dollar amount for a solution could be, only enough to fund a third of the intersections, talking to different agencies like police or maybe transit, you're able to find funding that can spread across to further intersections and further deploy your city or your region. As part of that, too, all of our solutions, so we talked about kind of the three generations, infrared, GPS, and a cellular centralized based solution. All of these solutions work in parallel. So this has been a huge benefit to our customers, especially a lot of our legacy infrared-based customers. Being able to migrate slowly from IR to GPS or IR to cellular, centralized, being able to do that migration over time and not do a rip and replace is highly desirable. Obviously, to rip and replace the technology, there's a high upfront. There can be a high upfront cost, as well as a lot of work involved to do that. And being able to slowly migrate as funding is available is also extremely desirable and something that we can do as part of our solutions. Montreal, a customer that we're working with, is a really great example of this. We worked with them to determine, okay, you have infrared-based technology, you have GPS radio-based technology, but you want to go centralized. You have some traffic controllers that don't support standard preemption or priority request protocols. Maybe we have to put hardware at those intersections. So they're really a great example of different ways that we've deployed the solution with basically almost all of our technologies, and the whole system is working basically in synchronicity together. So it's something that is definitely possible. Just making sure that you find the right solution to be able to do that is obviously really important. So as part of the discovery process that we go through with customers in determining really what's the best solution, right? We have a variety of different technologies, but what's the best solution that's going to work for your city? And a big question is part of that is what's your objective, right? Are you trying to reduce response times? Are you trying to reduce the number of crashes or incidents you're having? Do you have a preemption solution already, but is it hard to maintain, right? Are you not getting the distance? Are you not able to preempt around corners? Things like that. You know, what are your challenges that you're seeing? As part of that too, what infrastructure do you have? Like I said, do you have a preemption solution already? Does your city have a priority control solution for your transit? And what are you planning for the future? Do you have, let's say, fiber to all of your intersections today? Is that something that you're going to be planning on over the next 5 years, 10 years? Do you have network comms on your vehicles? Is that network comms on something like a you know, a private network or something on FirstNet or maybe Verizon's solution as well for emergency response? What do you have and where are you going really is a big question. And then like the connectivity, like I said as well. Do you have connectivity on your vehicles? Do you have connectivity on your intersections? What data can we collect this to? Obviously, like I said, you know, the big data, which is kind of a buzzword, but using data to be able to better analyze the system, better report on the system is something that's really important as well. And then who are the key stakeholders? You know, prior it was really more, you know, working with a fire agency or a public safety agency, maybe police or emergency vehicle, you know, purchasing the system and having the traffic department install. Gone are kind of those days where you can kind of just work with one agency. We're seeing really the requirement to work with multiple agencies throughout the city, and you might be working with the city and the state and the county, right? So you might be working with a variety of different people, making sure that everybody kind of has buy-in, they have a say in the solution, and making sure that it works for everyone. And then obviously as part of that, with everything now being network connected, IT is a key component to this as well. Making sure they have buy-in, making sure that they're comfortable with the solution in order to make sure it's a success for your city is really important as well. So after we go through some of those questions, really understanding the architecture, so based on those questions we can determine, hey, does a GPS radio system, distributed system make most sense to you? Does a centralized solution make more sense to you that we can utilize the existing infrastructure? Based on that, there's a couple different ways that we can look at kind of deploying this. We talked about the traditional capital purchase, so really just the upfront capital funds going into a capital budget to be able to pay for it all upfront, which is, like we said, it's more of a traditional way of doing it, but still definitely a vast majority, or maybe not vast majority, a majority of customers are still purchasing that way. Another way is a lease. So a lot of our customers, they don't necessarily have the funding right now, but they want to budget out for the next 5-10 years, right? So that they can actually own the equipment at the end. But they can deploy their entire city or their entire region, but they don't have to have the upfront capital purchase. Obviously, there's a slight interest rate on that, but for a city to be able to deploy right away, see the benefit right away, but pay for it over time can be really beneficial. And then finally, subscription. So this is something that we released a few years ago now, a subscription-based preemption system, what we should call priority control as a service. And really what priority control as a service is we provide, kind of the coin phrase, really we provide a green light, and you don't really have to worry about the rest, meaning that we provide all the hardware for the solution, we provide all the installation for the solution, we do all the reporting, we provide, for example, monthly reports on the system. We also maintain and manage everything. We monitor all the equipment as well. So in a lot of cases, we can see a failure prior to you even determining or realizing that there's a failure in the system. So we're proactively, instead of reactively fixing the issues that you see in your system, we're actually proactively going out and doing reporting on the system, making sure everything's up and running. If we see a failure, we're sending out people before, in some cases, before the agency even realizes that there's a problem. So making sure, obviously, the system is highly reliable is something that's really important to us, and obviously important to our customers as well. Some other benefits, like I said, no capital upfront. In this case, you actually don't even own any of the equipment. You don't have to maintain any of the equipment. You don't have to take on the technology risk, like we talked about. There's kind of this idea of, well, are we going centralized with cellular 5G? Are we going DSRC, which, to do kind of a plug, GTT is working with DSRC radios as well, doing some pilot projects with those. But, you know, not wanting to take on that technology risk but still be able to provide a solution is also highly desirable with a PCAS. Obviously, since you don't own any of the equipment or maintain it, GTT then takes on that technology risk. So whenever the subscription is up, and the subscription, I guess just to be clear, is basically an intersection and vehicle monthly fee, so something per vehicle, something per intersection, and obviously we can provide pricing on that on an agency-by-agency basis if needed. But having the ability to not take on that technology risk is something that's really important as well. So some different quotes that we're getting from customers on this. Like we said, this has kind of been a hot item, especially in certain regions. Be able to use an operating budget instead of a capital budget is really great. A lot of fire agencies are even moving, especially even to their vehicles or their tires or their equipment are all a lease or a subscription base. So moving to this model is definitely desirable. So yeah, just some quotes. The industry is trending into an as-service purchasing. I don't need to own the equipment. I just want to show up and have it work. I just want my team to focus on firefighting and not maintaining the technology. Obviously, taking that I don't want to call it headache, but the management piece away from the other people on your staff that are maintaining the other equipment can definitely be highly desirable. And like I said, it's been definitely something that we've seen a lot of customers moving to. So as a recap, EVP gives you the green light, right? We talked about what EVP is, how it works, and different ways to deploy it. EVP gets you there safer and faster. We talked about some different studies that we've done, case studies, seen up to 25, in some cases over 30% reduction in response time. In a lot of cases, up to 70% reduction in intersection crashes. Every situation is unique, so gone are kind of the days where we could just sell the same solution to every single customer. Every single customer's needs are different. Your infrastructure is different. Your plan over the next 5-10 years is different. Making sure that you find a partner that can kind of move in the direction that you want to go is definitely important. Understanding the goals that you have as well as the challenges. And then finally, preemption is available as a service. So not as much worry about the details as far as, what technology do you want to invest in, how do you maintain the equipment. You really don't have to worry about that. That could be all done as a service now to really kind of ease your mind. Another way that it's been described is cable, right? Cable, you purchase it really as a service, as an ongoing fee to be able to access internet or TV, and all the equipment is owned by GTT, and we make sure that if there's a failure, we're replacing it, and you don't have to worry about having the extra money to do any sort of replacements or hardware repairs as well. So with that, that's all I had, and I'll open it up to questions.
Great. Thank you, Josh. We'll go ahead and take some questions now. Just a reminder, be sure to type your questions in the question box in your control panel to the right, or it could be floating as well. You could also just go ahead and enter it into the chat option as well. We do have a few questions, Josh. Some of the content you've already covered, so I'll just review the questions in the order that they were submitted, if that's okay.
Yep.
Josh, you mentioned Montreal. What other cities do you work with, and what types of solutions are the cities asking for?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So Montreal is a large customer of ours. They did a centralized. We actually did a true priority control solution for their entire city. So their goal of that was to make sure that all of their vehicles that are moving in and out of the city that are either public, freight, or whatever else are all managed through a single system. So that's actually a transit system. They're actually adding snowplows and emergency vehicles as well, police and fire. So that was a combination centralized GPS radio and infrared solution. Harris County, Houston, Texas, we're deploying what we call a hybrid solution. That's a radio-based cell as backup, and then primarily a cell-based system. So that's another one. As far as other solutions or cities that we've deployed in, like I said, we have about 3,100. As far as our other larger cities, I would say, at least recently, I'll state that. New York City and San Francisco, we also have both centralized and distributed solutions there. And a lot of the challenges, especially that larger cities are facing, are congestion. So it's becoming even more difficult to send a preemption request a half a mile out with a traditional, what we call distributed or an infrared radio-based solution. Having that centralized component is really important, as well as the reporting capabilities. Being able to show the effectiveness of the system by providing travel time reports and things like that with our system and with our reporting features has definitely been something that's hit a key note for customers and are really becoming requirements.
Great. Now we have a question regarding a couple questions regarding competition. Who does preemption? And you've been the standard for 50 years, and everyone's heard of Opticom, but are you the market leader, and who are your competitors? And then how do you rank up against your competition?
Yeah, so that's obviously, as technology evolves, there's kind of competition that's coming up here and there. A lot of it is focusing on certain specific technologies. Obviously, a lot of their customer bases, as well as a number of different factors are different. They kind of take, in some cases, a different approach. And I think a big piece of that competition is really, like I said, emerging technologies. Now, since everything's connected, we can do everything centrally, meaning you can do an entirely software-based solution. I would say some of the challenges that you see with other systems is really to determine if the solutions that they're providing are proven. Obviously, if you're making an investment with that company, making sure that whatever they supply is proven and you're not kind of the beta customer is really important for making sure that whatever solution that you purchase is going to work for you. And then obviously, not just thinking about, okay, how is this going to affect my fire agency, but really how is it going to affect my city, right? Can we provide a solution that's citywide? Otherwise, you're going to have, a preemption system for fire vehicles, a preemption system for EVP vehicles, and you have a different priority system for transit. And having a variety of systems and technologies can be really hard to maintain, especially for your traffic department. So making sure that whatever you purchase can be utilized across the city is also important. So I know I didn't say specifically, different players that are out there, but there's definitely, like I said, there's definitely other competition that we're seeing pop up here and there. But really, those are the key things that I guess I would think about when you're looking at other competition that's out there.
Thank you. Another question is, we currently have IR installed and we're considering other options, but IR works. Why would I change, and what are the benefits of migrating from an IR-based solution?
Yeah, so one thing we always talk to different agencies on is really look at your IR system and really do an audit to see, everything that's currently functioning. Obviously, the IR systems have been really highly reliable. And in some cases, that's almost made it difficult in some ways for agencies to move to some better technologies. But obviously, making sure doing an audit, make sure everything's working. We see equipment out there that's 20 plus years old. Making sure all of that's still working is important. Sometimes we work with different cities that say they go through the city and they say, everything's working fine, and then we go do an audit and it looks like 25% of their intersections actually aren't even getting preemption requests. Another thing to think about too is reporting, like data and reporting. Data and reporting is becoming much more important in making sure that whatever you invest in and are maintaining is something that is being utilized and showing benefit with more of a distributed GPS or a radio-based system. And a centralized system. There's additional reporting that you can do that really is showing a lot of benefit. So being able to report on that, whether it be to your council or other people within the city that you have to report your findings to, and different technology you're utilizing to benefit the city, that's important. So yeah, I would look at those items if you have an IR space system and are thinking about moving to a newer technology.
Great. Josh, can you talk more about integration with existing GPS LTE in-vehicle systems and integration with third-party systems like CAD or traffic management systems?
Yeah, so we're actively pursuing basically general standards. So our goal really is to utilize existing industry standards to be able to communicate obviously things like GPS information from a vehicle existing. We did that in New York City and Montreal, or being able to use protocols, industry standard intersection protocols to communicate to traffic equipment is also important. Being able to do a lot of that computing on the cloud side and not having to worry about additional equipment at the intersection is something that, like I said, we're seeing benefit in. And it's really dependent on the vendor. Different vendors that we're working with from whether it be on the traffic side, ATMS or traffic controller vendors, as well as on the vehicle side. So we're looking at, CAD systems, AVLs. A lot of times there's really not a industry standard. We're trying to drive towards standards that are already available. But in a lot of cases, I shouldn't say in a lot of cases. In some cases, we're required to use, another agency's, another vendor's APIs. So we're definitely really flexible on that. Obviously, we all want to drive towards standards because it makes it easier for all parties involved. But being able to coordinate with those vendors for a solution is something that we're definitely striving towards. And we're in contact. We have NDAs up with a variety of different vendors in order to provide integrated solutions.
Thank you. And with PCAS, would a municipality hand over all of their GTT equipment already owned and leave all installation and maintenance to GTT? And how can we get more information on PCAS?
Yeah, so we can definitely follow up with you or all of you with additional details on PCAS. Typically, PCAS is, as far as an infrastructure or a model, typically we were using more of a radio-based or the GPS radio-based or a centralized solution, just because obviously as a service, it's really designed so that you get the green light. If, for example, you do have equipment that you recently purchased from GTT, we're definitely willing to look to see if there's any sort of discounting or things that we can provide as almost like a trade-in in order to migrate to a PCAS solution. But we'll probably take those on a case-by-case basis. But definitely happy to work with you. Want to figure out, obviously make sure what solution is best for you based on your current investments.
Thank you, Josh. Another question is, my city has a lot of demands on our budget, especially the capital budget, which is high visibility. I've used Opticom in another city, and I'd like to use it in the city I work in now. Can we do a pilot to help make the case?
Yeah, absolutely. We are always willing to work with your agency to do a pilot project. Obviously work with and we can get you in contact with either your dealer or your local sales representative from GTT. And we can get you in contact with someone that can help set up a pilot project. We're always looking to pilot projects with customers and happy to show the benefits of EVP.
Great. Here's a fun one. How much does Opticom cost per intersection? And how much is the subscription cost, or PCAS, sorry? Is it intersection or vehicle?
Yeah, so PCAS is a little bit dependent on a variety of different things. Like I said, even some discounting, for example, if you have existing equipment that you would want to trade in to see if that's available. It really just depends on scale too. Obviously, if you have a larger deployment, the per intersection per vehicle cost is reduced. But if you have a smaller agencies, maybe 3 vehicles and 6 intersections, the per vehicle and per intersection cost is a little more, just because it's the cost, especially some of the upfront costs are spread out a little more. So I hate to give it's a case by case, but it really is. We can work with you to help come up with some budgetary numbers to give you at least an idea. But that's without knowing the agency or what technology you want to use, whether it be a centralized or distributed. It's really hard to give out a number. So we'll definitely follow up with you and provide you with some budgetary numbers. So Amy, if you want to take a note on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds good. I have a couple more questions. I'm going to kind of condense them if that's okay. If we decide to use Opticom, what's required of other departments like city and traffic? Does it work with other vehicles outside of emergency? And will GTT help us install and maintain the system, or are we on our own?
Yeah, so we provide definitely a turnkey solution. So a big part of our business now is either working with our dealer or working with GTT directly to make sure that the solution is properly installed. We give customers the option to install it themselves, and we'll train you on it. But we're more than happy to work with you to get it installed. In a lot of cases, that's providing really more of a turnkey solution is really desirable, and we're happy to do that. So yes, we'll definitely help you with that. And then what was the first part of that question? I think I missed that.
What's involved with other departments like city or traffic? Okay.
Yeah, so obviously traffic departments are the ones that are responsible for the intersections, right? So they are the ones that determine if preemption will even be allowed in the city. Obviously, that's an agreement that has to be done throughout the city. So in some cases, we've worked with different traffic departments. They've not wanted it, but because of maybe the mayor or someone else's decision that, hey, this is really beneficial to the city, they've determined that, okay, we'll work with you to put in this solution. But obviously making sure that you're on the same page with the traffic department is really important for a preemption solution. Obviously, we can't talk to the intersection if there's nothing there or if we're not connected to it. And they hold kind of the keys to the castle when it comes to the intersections. But I think a big part of that is, and we have data on this too if you need it. The concern is that it's going to be very disruptive to traffic, or a lot of the times they have timing on their lights and they want to make sure that the timing stays in sync. We have a lot of data and information we can provide to help alleviate some of those concerns in different ways that we can kind of configure the system to minimize impact. So those are a couple different ways, at least with traffic, that you might want to discuss. And then as far as obviously transit, talking to transit and say, hey, we're putting this equipment in at the intersection. Do you guys want to utilize it and see if they want to use some of their budget to provide a priority control solution? Might be something of interest to them in order to make sure that they have better on-time performance for their buses.
Okay, one final question. Does preemption system send proactive notification of device outages?
So the solution depends on what type of solution we're talking about. Obviously, we talked about a variety. We do have monitoring within our CMS software, which is our central management software, where you can actually monitor and alert on equipment failures.
Great, excellent. That's all of our questions. Is there anything else you wanted to cover, Josh?
No, like I said, thanks everyone for joining. Definitely let us know if you have additional questions and things. And I'm happy to set up one-on-one meetings as well to talk about any of this in additional detail.
Great, thank you, Josh. And thank you everyone for attending. We appreciate your attending our webinars. Again, we'll send out the recording and related content tomorrow. And if you have any further questions or interests, we encourage that you contact us directly. Josh is available as well, and we'll arrange a time for you to speak to a GTT resource. Again, thank you for joining us today, and have a great day. Thank you.